In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course-Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Adversity doesn't define you. Your response to it does. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into 3 transformative themes: overcoming life-altering challenges, redefining visibility through innovations, and building confidence through community. Our guest today is Lyndsay Watterson, an entrepreneur, advocate, and the founder of NeoWalk Ltd., a company revolutionizing mobility aids. After losing her leg due to a catastrophic MRSA infections, Lyndsay transformed her journey into a movement, creating stylish, empowering walking stick that turned mobility into an expression of confidence rather than limitation. From her experience in the Paralympic and circus performing to redefining self-image and entrepreneurships, Lyndsay's story is an inspiration for resilience and reinvention. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let her well know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your supports help more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Miss Lyndsay Watterson, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's lovely to have you here, and your personal story and how that became a business is very inspiring. So I'm looking forward to great conversations. To kick us off, please tell us more about NeoWalk.
So NeoWalk is it's a one-of-a-kind business. I'm the owner and the designer. We make super stylish, colourful, sexy, call them what you want, but we make gorgeous acrylic walking sticks that, in a nutshell, they give people confidence. Where when you use a mobility aid, you can quite often be lacking a lot of confidence, and there's a lot of shame surrounding mobility aids. But yeah, so we've kind of turned it on its head. We're disrupting the market and what people normally expect.
That's beautiful. And it is definitely the case. And we'll dive deeper into some of that shames and how you guys are disrupting it, because I think it's quite beautiful. I really love, and I do this with all my guests, I'd love to bring you back perhaps to how everything got started. And obviously, I know that you're very, very open about some of your life journey and the highs and lows, which is also quite lovely. But I want you to tell me, before obviously life changed in 2010, and you were obviously suffered quite a major injury. I would love to, if you could tell me how your life was like, and you're quite a vibrant person. So describe to me basically where that character of yours comes, and perhaps what were your biggest passion at the time.
So previous to, there is kind of life before and life after. So yes. Life before, I'm a mum to 2 amazing kids, boy and a girl, who are now a man and a woman that I'm hugely proud of. Bob and Hannah, they both work with me as well. So I was mum to them. I'd trained to be a hairdresser. I'm creative. I always love working with these things. Love working with my hands, love colour. And I'd lived with osteoarthritis since I was a younger, teenager, sort of 13, 14 years old. So I was no stranger to surgery and living with a level of disability pretty much all my life, really. But yeah, I was mum. I was doing the school run. I was cooking tea, baking terrible birthday cakes. I was all these things, and they will confirm that for you. And I trained to be a hairdresser, and this was going to be the sort of next chapter as the kids got older. So there I was, trained, ready, and willing. And then a surgery that I needed on one of my knees, changed the whole course of my life.
Yes, exactly. And let's definitely talk about that catastrophic MRSA infections that truly was a life-changing moment, obviously, as you described it properly. And it seemed like you contracted a very severe one from my research and what I was able to read. And within that moment of hardships, I think that obviously there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to learn from perhaps that basically, I suppose, low that turned into quite an eye, which is why we're so proud to have you here today. But if you can take me back to that moment of kind of like when you realized that amputation was inevitable, and how you did basically process to make such a life-altering decisions, I'd love to kind of like hear you speak your mind about that.
Yeah. It's probably the most traumatic time of my life that I've ever gone through. So I was having surgery on this knee, and I contracted the infection during surgery. So I was stitched up and sent home. Not stitched up, as in stitched up, but they literally stitched me up and sent me home.
Right.
And then the infection bubbled away and started causing damage to my leg, but nobody knew what was going on until I was seriously ill. So more surgeries, weeks and weeks in hospital, weeks of IV antibiotics to try and stave off this infection, but it did a lot of damage until they managed to stop it. So I lived with the leg that I was left with. They basically saved my leg, as orthopedic surgeons do. They're very big on saving things. And I lived with it for 3 years, and it was super painful. I could barely walk on it. I was using a wheelchair anyway because I couldn't walk very far. So I'd kind of already lost that leg, even though I was looking at it. It was no longer a team player. All it was doing was holding me back, and the inevitability of amputation was just around the corner, be it in a year, 3 years, 4 years, if I fell over, if I damaged it. I was told so many different things about look after it, you're not getting another one, that type thing. And I lived with it, and it did feel like it was holding me back. And I made the decision to have an elective amputation above the knee, because it was my knee and all the way down my leg that had been severely damaged. And people sort of say, "Oh, that's the hardest decision to make in the world, to lose a limb. What would you lose? An arm, a leg? It's the hardest." But I felt like I'd lost it 3 years earlier because all it was doing was holding me back. So actually the decision to have the leg amputated came easier than you think. The aftermath was not easy. And although I'd considered the aftermath and I'd taken counselling and I'd spoken to a lot of people, it was difficult to deal with. But yeah, the actual decision, it came pretty easy. After 3 years, it was like, this thing just belongs in the bin. All it's doing is holding me back. So that's what I did. And one day I had it and the next day I didn't.
No, and that's very powerful. That's very powerful because I think you're pointing out something that a lot of others people share, which is when you have sometimes tangibly it was basically your leg was there, but in the intangible, perhaps in your understanding of the situations, it was doing more harm than good, which is it just shows how perhaps that painful such a process can be. And to me personally, I always love to describe life in this way, which is we're not defined by what happened, but how we respond to it, perhaps. And when perhaps you bring yourself back to that positions of making that decisions, it seems to me like you made that decisions actually with perhaps I wouldn't say smiling, but certainly to a certain extent with kind of like a positivity attached to it, right?
Totally. And yeah, it was almost because what happened to me with the infection and the following, the damage it left, that was stuff that happened to me. And I was able to take back the power and take back the decision-making process in my life. And I decided that this thing it just needed to go. So it was really empowering to be able to make that decision and to take back that that power again.
Right. That makes sense. Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
So you were talking about these early challenges of adjusting, like, obviously lives as an amputee, and truly, and just again going deeper into the kind of the philosophical standpoint. Obviously, losing a limb is physical, but it's also emotional. It's also psychological, perhaps. So tell me more about how were some of the toughest challenge that you faced within those first months, as in basically an early amputee, and how did you go through them, perhaps?
I think the thing that kept me going was, apart from adrenaline, I think I was fueled purely on adrenaline for the first 6 weeks. But the thing that kept me going was all the amputees that I'd spoken to previous to the surgery had all said, you'll wish you did it sooner. And that was the one bit of advice that I kept having in my head. People found so much more positivity in losing their limb than they did negativity. So that kind of kept me going. What held me back, what was the hardest thing to deal with was body image. And that could be vanity. It could be, I was only 43 when I lost my leg.
Right.
Yeah, call it vanity, but I didn't like the way I looked. And I really didn't. It was just so different to how I'd been. I couldn't walk, so I was still in the wheelchair. Everything about me had just changed, and I just didn't recognize myself. There was a lot of fear still. I was still very scared about how it was all going to work out. I knew I'd taken a big leap of faith. But yeah, the body image side of it was very difficult, and I did take counselling on that. The service that we have over in the UK, they do offer you really good counselling and rehabilitation services when you do become an amputee. So I had counselling that helped me work through some of the issues I was going through. But you know, when I talk to amputees now, because I get asked to not coach, but just help people through the process of what they're going through. The one thing that helped me was time. And that was the one thing nobody could give me. I just had to work through it. So, yeah, it was difficult. I had to still work, because I still had bills to pay. I had kids at home, you know, so I had all that churning around in my head about what the future was going to bring. But yeah, it was a lot of body image issues and learning to accept that leg had gone. And bizarrely, even today, 15 years later, it still feels like it's there. And if that's what anybody wonders, you know, can you still feel it? You absolutely can. And even in the cold weather, I call it my invisible leg now, because obviously you can't see it.
Right.
The foot still gets cold in the winter. You know, I mean, please, there's nothing I can do about it, but I get a cold foot.
That's interesting.
Your brain is so powerful. You know, it still leads me to believe that leg's there. I don't feel pain in it, you know, fortunately, which was a risk of the surgery, that my brain would remember the pain that my leg had felt, but I don't. So that was a real plus. So I just lost this limb and then prepared to get ready to use a prosthetic. And again, in the UK, they dive you straight into that really quickly. They want you to get that feeling of being stood upright again. And that's what I did.
Right, absolutely, and I want to rebound on the self-image portions of what you were describing, as somebody obviously as an early amputee yourself. Do you think that the hardest thing from a self-image perspective was it basically from your own perspective, your own confidence, and perhaps your own understanding that you're less than you were, or any societal pressures basically that surround it? Perhaps a mix of both. Tell me more about where do you think that pain came from? It
was definitely a mix of both, because, I mean, people stare. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of amputees there are in the world, but, you know, people stare. But okay. I made the mistake, and I've said this to a lot of people, I made the mistake of thinking that I knew what those people were thinking. And I used to think they were thinking, poor her, thank God I'm not her. I used to assume that I knew what they were thinking. And of course I didn't. I had no idea. People, when they look, they scan, they're looking at so many things every day. And if you see something out of the normal, you maybe look again, you scan it again just to get in your head. They could have been thinking, good for her. They could have been thinking, gosh, she's got nice hair. They could have been thinking, any number of things. I didn't know what they were thinking. But in my head, I felt their pity. And that was a dangerous thing to do because that held me back as well. And it still happens. People still stare, but I invite it and say, do you want to ask me anything? Children stare. Children will say to their parents, can I look at that lady with the one leg? And I'll say, it's fine. Come and ask me. It's, and going off topic, most children, all they want to know is, does it hurt? No, it doesn't. And then they're fine. And then they literally will either just want to look at your leg or they look at your wheelchair or they just think, that they're all they want to know is, does it hurt? So I went through all that. My confidence just plummeted. I didn't leave the house. I was scared to leave the house, that I scared I was going to injure myself. It's a whole bundle of emotions really. But I found the people staring very difficult. And that's something, again, where you will dig into it further, but there's a stigma surrounding being not the same as everybody else. Yes. You are less than. And of course, in your head, you're wondering what you're going to be able to do. Will I be able to walk? Will I be able to run? Because some amputees, they run. Will I be able to get out of this wheelchair? There's just so many fears and questions floating around in your head. And of course, you've also got people telling you, that you won't be able to do things.
Yes.
You won't be able to do that again. You won't be able to do that. And that didn't seem fair to me because I hadn't tried. So, in my head, I was thinking, well, we'll just see about that. I'm feisty and, I was wanting the opportunity to try all these things just to see, to prove people wrong in the end. And that's what I ended up doing. But after the amputation, I did become a bit of a yes person. When I was up and walking on the prosthetic, do you want to do this? Yes, I will. Do you want to, there's a job there? Yes, I will. And I just to challenge myself all the time. And I think that was important that carried me through. It was that feeling of progress because previous to the amputation, all I was looking forward to was steady decline. So progress became really important to me. So I was constantly challenging myself, a few extra steps a day, just small things. But
right. Absolutely. So perhaps it was more intrigue than despair is when you truly think about it from the looks you were getting and so on. Yeah. And especially from children, I suppose, right? Or they're just innocent creature trying to understand. Yeah. And that's so important. I don't recall where I heard this quote, but disability is not the end of the road. It's a detour to a new, unexpected adventure. I think it's in Dancing in the Rain, but I might be wrong. And but from that perspective, and let's dive actually to some of that stigmatization that you face from again some of those. And maybe they're not, and perhaps that's just me speaking out loud here. Perhaps they were not meant to be basically insulting, but perhaps they are from the eyes of the beholders and some of these amputees facing some of these inquiries. But tell me more about. You mentioned some, but I'd love if you can go a little bit deeper into some of that stigmatization and what did that look like? What are basically some of verbal or nonverbal, even basically a stigmatization that you face on a daily or perhaps recurrent basis?
There's one thing that I vividly remember. I was out in my wheelchair, no leg. I didn't have a prosthetic on, and I was near a shoe shop, and there was these two guys. Probably had a few drinks, maybe, and it said buy one get one free, and they out loud laughed and said, "Look at her, she only needs one anyway." Mm-hmm. And, I'd laugh at that joke now. I've made that joke about myself now, but back then it was like a kick to the stomach. And that kind of, that was the thing that led me to believe that people were possibly pitying me, possibly mocking me, it was all, again, but it was guesswork. I was just purely guessing what these people were thinking. But I vividly remember that. So there sort of lies the stigma that because I've got one leg, people can laugh at me. And that's stuck with me, quite vividly.
Yeah.
But yeah, things like that. And people go through that every day. People with disabilities, not just amputees, but with any kind of disability, young, old. I think a lot of the stigma that comes from using mobility aids, especially for people that don't have a visible disability, I think they get, you're too young to be using that walking stick. You're putting it on, you're faking it. And sometimes I was grateful that I had a visible disability. So all I had to do was look at me and go, yeah, fair enough, and move on. But I think now a lot of the customers and friends that I deal with, that if they have an invisible disability, say for example, someone with MS or someone with, rheumatoid arthritis, it's not necessarily visible to everybody, but oh my word, they probably do need a mobility aid. So why should they be stigmatized and said, you're faking it, you shouldn't be using that? And
right.
It's real. It happens every day.
Yeah. No, and this is, obviously those are horrible comments that should have never been made in the first place. Where do you think they come from? Do you think they come from, on the eyes of the person in which basically make those comments? Isn't that a clear indication perhaps of a lack of confidence on their part? Basically to go after someone in this fashion. Where do you think that perhaps urge comes from?
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, isn't it? It
is.
When you hear that's how, the general public, a perfect stranger can address you, fair enough, my sister can make jokes at me, but early on, nobody was allowed to make jokes at me. But I did. That isn't really true, because I found that I got through it with a lot of very black humor.
Right.
Dark humor, that, laughing at situations where if I hadn't laughed, I probably would have just curled up and cried. So I did get through it with a lot of quite dark humor. But I think it comes from their inexperience of meeting people with disabilities, especially a very visible one like that. How many people have met an amputee? Have you met? You may have, you may not have. I don't know.
Yes, I did. Personally, I did.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is inexperience of either meeting somebody, it's not being educated in how to talk to people, the kind of language to use.
All right.
It's that, be kind. If you can be anything, be kind. And I think now, because disability is a lot more high profile, because we're talking 15 years ago now when I lost my leg. Disability is a lot more high profile. Paralympians are a lot more respected. The Help for Heroes movement, and people are a lot more aware of disability. They may know how to speak a bit better. My experience is a lot of people still get a lot of this abuse in the street every day. But yeah, it's uneducated, it's unkind, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, it truly is. And I can see this being a comment that is more relevant to those with invisible, basically injuries or perhaps conditions. One of my good friends actually hosts a TV show called Invisible Condition and talks about the fact that it's quite hard for people to fully grasp that even though if somebody actually look absolutely basically like them and like most, there's still need basically a lot of kerfuffles, a lot of basically difficulties, and even basically going all the way to needing mobility aids. And such comments obviously are unacceptable to anyone. Is there, from your perspective, outside of the simple fact of not being invisible, is there any other major difference between having a visible, basically, condition like the one you have, perhaps compared to the people in which have one in which is completely invisible? Tell me more about those. Is there anything basically that comes to mind?
I don't think so. It's a really good question, actually. I've never actually delved into that in my head. Possibly psychologically, people who have to deal with, because if you take that interaction with the stranger saying, you shouldn't be using that mobility aid, take it one step further. They then lean in and say, well, what's the matter with you? What's wrong with you?
Right.
You're possibly taking somebody back to the most traumatic period of their life, and they're not going to share that with a perfect stranger, on the street, just to be questioned like that. I used to get asked if I'd been a soldier because I was young, did you lose it in the war, or did no, I didn't. I've sometimes made up things. Used it. I've lost it in a skydiving accident, or a shark bit me, or, sometimes I've done that just to mess with people a little bit.
Right.
But I don't really think, apart from the psychological fallout of being kind of questioned in that way, if you have an invisible disability, you do get people coming up and questioning you. And I think the psychological fallout probably shouldn't be underestimated.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, and all those things are so important to be aware of. And for your, obviously in your story specifically, and I want to dive into, the turning point, because obviously it's very apparent now that you never basically led that amputation basically being the end of something as great as your life, perhaps, but you embrace as much more of a new beginning in your mindset to be shifted to survival, to thriving, which is absolutely incredible. And most people, actually injured or uninjured, never actually fully realize the potential that they have. Tell me more about that turning point and that moment where you say, you know what, let me fully embrace this new reality and thriving instead of merely surviving.
Yeah. So go back to when I said I chose the amputation, it was a choice over decline.
Yes.
To progress. And that was what drove me. So when I started making progress and I could walk, and I was walking with a prosthetic leg, and I was getting quite good at it. I kept myself quite fit. And mentally, I think when I was upright again, it's different sitting in a wheelchair. Don't let anybody tell you it isn't, because people look over the top of you and, they talk to the person that you're with. And, but actually being upright, I felt like part of the world again. And that was a real turning point for me. And then the other turning point, of course, was when I really needed to get back to work, and I had to find something that I got, that I could offer, something that I could do. I couldn't hairdress any longer. I wouldn't have the confidence to stand. And I didn't. I think I just saw it as a new beginning, like you said, and I just felt like I needed to see where this would lead me. Yeah, that was when I joined an agency called Amputees in Action, and they found work for amputees. And it was as simple as that. And that began the big change in my life.
Interesting. And I'm quoting yourself directly here because I think it's definitely worth it. I could have let it break me, but instead I choose to rebuild myself into something even stronger. Which I think reflect very well about what you just mentioned. And talking about basically how your life basically got amplified through it, you became an athlete, right? And you had a Paralympic basically experience, which I'd love to dive deeper into. Obviously, like you said, which I think is beautiful. I watch the Paralympics when I can, because it's very empowering, actually, and there's absolute beauty within it. Perhaps it was all that progress. What inspired you perhaps to take a step forward and say, you know what, let me be an athlete on top of it. How was that beginning of that journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, initially the work that I did through this agency was being a live action casualty in exercises for the army, for the police, ambulance service, security services. And I would go along with a bunch of friends who were amputees as well. And we would be made to look like we had just been blown up or shot, or, it was gory. It was...
Okay.
I've made people vomit, Sam. I've made people cry, squirt blood in their faces. It was to pretend that you'd literally just lost that limb. And we had these fake prosthetic-y type limbs made to look as if the leg had just been blown off. It was gruesome. Really gruesome. And I did that for quite a while. So that was my introduction back into work. But what it also introduced me to was people that were just like me. So it introduced me to a whole bunch of other amputees, who were out there just doing their day-to-day stuff. And they were working and they were going back home, and they were mum, they were dad, they were, they were just getting on with their normal life, and this was their job. So it introduced me to that, but I felt strong again. And it wasn't just strong in body, it was strong up here as well. And I think that took a while to come back. And then I got an email from the same agency asking about performing. I wasn't an athlete, although it did take a lot of athletic skills. I was to perform in the opening and closing Paralympic ceremonies.
Yes.
And I ran away to the circus. I went and trained to be a circus performer for 6 months so I could fly around in the air on high wires and do trapeze work. And I learned to do all that. It was crazy. And I was with a bunch of people who were just like me. And there was 40 of us. There was every kind of disability. There were amputees, there were paraplegics, there was people with cerebral palsy, there was deaf people, blind people, you name it. We were just a complete bunch of I'm going to say misfits, because that's what we all described ourselves as. And I was with these people for 6 months, and the power that came from that was indescribable. I felt quite invincible. And everything that I tried, I found a way to do it. And one of my circus teachers, she changed my way of thinking just by saying, you can do anything. You just might do it differently. And she didn't say that I was different. She just said, I'll do it differently. And that was so powerful. I performed in the opening and closing ceremonies.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that mindset shift is so important. Tell me more about the community aspect. I feel like obviously when you just suffer such an amputation like the one you had, there is probably this feeling of you're alone within basically this world, and perhaps, like you said, it misfits. Then you meet a bunch of other perhaps misfits, and then you're like, you know what? Actually life isn't that bad. There's incredible things being done here. Tell me more about what that did for, I suppose, your mental sanity, and I suppose the rest of your life, to just meet that community and kind of like the early beginnings of sharing and loving and perhaps being generous towards that community.
Yeah, that meeting those 40 people, that was my introduction to how important community is. And that's something that we concentrate a lot on in the business, in Neo Walk. We encourage people to have that community feeling, so you don't feel like you're alone. But yeah, crazy guys. It was, of the 40 people, you would think, and I'm sure they thought, some of them will give in, they'll give it, but that nobody did in the 6 months. No, because we were broken already. That they couldn't break us any more than we were broken already. So nobody gave in. And I always think to this day, that's probably why they got 40, because they thought half of them were probably going to give up, but nobody did. We all stuck together. We supported each other. It was so powerful. Lifelong friends. I've made friends in that community that I still have now, that changed my whole perspective. And a lot of them have been amputees for maybe 30 years, a lot longer than I was very new at that stage. And they kind of taught me that time does change does change a lot of things. And again, it's that gift of time you can't give to anybody, but you can tell them that time will alter your perspective on it. You learn to work with what you've got rather than miss what you haven't got. And it's that feeling of thriving, which I want for everybody, but I particularly want for people that are living with disabilities. It's that feeling of thriving that I felt. I really found like I'd found my tribe. You know, when people say that and
Yes.
you kind of think, yeah, maybe you haven't found yours, but I really found mine.
Yeah, beautiful. And time does indeed typically makes it right. And you're talking obviously about being a circus performer and some of your film experiences as well, which is truly kind of like breaking the mold of disability at the end of the day. And I'm really wondering how those opportunities basically shape your view of disability and self expression, because now you were in a selected basically bunch where you were now in the completely opposite role of being the inspirer, being the person in which basically others look up to. And I think that transition might be one that is quite beautiful, but perhaps challenging more from your perspective, I suppose. Tell me more about how you not only say yes to these opportunities, but how it changed the rest of your life.
It taught me not to be afraid of being visible, because I had previously felt like I just wanted to be invisible. Partly, because of the staring and the lack of confidence. I felt like I just wanted to be invisible and disappear. But it taught me to be proud, and it taught me to not be afraid of being visible. It's disappointing that since then, representation in the media, the film industry, you hear of able-bodied people playing disabled people's roles, and you'll see disabled people kicking up a real fuss because we've got tons of talent to offer. We've got so much to offer, and I still think that harks back to people thinking that we're less than, that we're not the same as everybody else. We haven't got the same to offer. So when after the circus shenanigans, I got offered to be in a movie with comedian Jack Whitehall, and I played Peggy Sue, the one-legged stripper, who didn't take a lot of clothes off because she wasn't a very good stripper. So everything that I was taking off, the crowd were literally throwing back at me because I was a bad stripper. But nonetheless, I was there. They made me look like a pirate with a pirate peg leg, dark humor again, but I was so over it. It was funny. But even then on the set, I had people coming up to me saying, "God, that's amazing. How do they make it look like you've only got one leg?" Because they couldn't believe that somebody with one leg was capable of doing it, right, and would do it. And I was like, well, I've only got one leg. And that happened doing the army stuff as well. People saying, how do they make it look like you've only got one leg? It's that, well, I can't believe you're doing that. I can't believe you can. And I can't, wow. That still hasn't changed a huge amount today. A little bit, but there is more representation. But I still find that very disappointing. But yeah, it taught me to be proud, to be visible.
Right. But there's sort of two sides to that medal, right? There's kind of like the disappointment of receiving basically such, I suppose, flavorless inquiries, but there might be the empowerment side of it, which, because obviously you did it with one leg, and then they inquire you about, well, how is that possible? How do you play basically having one leg this good? And you're just there with the back of your mind saying, well, I only have one leg, right? So I think it's kind of like interesting this I suppose juxtapositions of both of these sensation and both of these two worlds kind of like existing at the same time. Yeah. And truly to me, and I had some disabled people inside my family, and perhaps I speak from experience, or at least I never found any sorts of, I never asked me any questions, or at least I don't recall any questions of of diminishing somebody's work because of their appearance one way or another. But I think it's something that the world is awakening to. Like you said, there's more and more representations. And I think that was also some of your objective with obviously funding Neil Walk, which we're now at that part of the story where you and from my understanding of it, you wanted to have the birth of the bold and a stylish, basically mobility brand. It seems to me, and I'd love to pick your brain on this, that, and we see this all over the world still yet, that there's a lack of not only stylishness but perhaps excitement towards it that I think is not only tangibly important, just in a sense of having quality and beautiful product, but also in the intangible, so important as it hold a symbol of who you are. I go as far as saying that, and I think you'll support it. Yeah. But tell me more about how did that idea go all the way to being a tangible, basically business, right? Tell me more about that process itself.
So I was good at walking. I was really good with my prosthetic leg. I was fit. I'd done, all this circus performing. I'd done all these different silly things. But I found that sometimes I needed a walking stick just to help me walk on some days with my prosthetic leg on. And when I looked at the market, there was nothing. It was very disappointing. There was nothing that really said anything about me. They were all made of wood, or they were flowery metal. They were just old fashioned. I don't want to say it, but and they made me feel old. They made me feel ugly and old. And I'm going to go back to the wanting to be invisible again. It made me still feel like I just didn't want to be looked at. So that was why I decided I would try and make an invisible walking stick. And that's when the clear acrylic enters the story. Because if you make a walking stick, I've got some over there. If you make a walking stick out of clear acrylic, you can barely see it, when you're walking with it. So I did that. And when I went out, people, because it was still very stylish because it was clear, and it had a lovely shape to it.
Right.
People started asking me about where I've got my walking stick and not about the disability. It shifted focus completely from the disability to where did you get your walking stick from? So I made other colours, and that it started to make me feel actually really, really trendy when I went out, because there I was walking around and people were stopping me all the time in the streets saying, "Oh, that's gorgeous. My auntie would like that." Or my grandma, grandma would love that. And it suddenly made me think, wow, this is a feeling that I could give to other people as well. This feeling of confidence that it's given me. And that was literally how the business was born.
And that's incredible. And I think that's, and I love the tagline also on your site, obviously, made to stand out, not to fit in. But truly what you said, I'd love to go deeper into that sentence you just gave, because I think it's wonderful, but truly made people inquire about the stick itself and not the disability. And that's such a major shift, right? That's such a major shift, because in many, many ways, perhaps it not only humanize the injury itself, but also I think it flipped the narrative of being less of on his head, because now people are understanding, or perhaps realizing that now there's this person being proud and standing up basically to basically their conditions and what it means. So from a psychological standpoint, more than the stick itself, tell me more about what you typically hear from the customers that you're serving and the community you're serving when it comes out to what it gives them for their mental sanity and the quality of life. Just expand on those thoughts.
I mean, the feeling it gave me is it made me that was my light bulb moment. That was when I knew, people talk about what their why is. That became my why. that became my start of committing to serve other people with disabilities and to try and give them what my walking sticks had given me. And repeatedly, over and over and over, they're the emails that we get. You know, people ask me about my disability now when I go out. People come and talk to me instead of being frightened of talking to me. People, I haven't left the house for 3 years because I was so ashamed to use a mobility aid outside. It goes on and on and on every single day. And it's those emails that they send shivers down my spine, because every time we send a walking stick out, we know that it's potentially going to change somebody's life. It's a conversation starter. It's a confidence giver. It's still a mobility aid. It functions perfectly well. It's a functioning aid, but it was given thought, and we thought about you. And a lot of designers don't actually dare to tread where mobility aids are found. But I mean, this week just gone, we've had the most exciting thing happen across the world, where, Primark, easy, accessible fashion, they've launched their first adaptive range. And it's a friend of the business that's designed it, Victoria Jenkins, and she's designed this whole adaptive range that Primark are stocking in like 100 different countries. And that's... I can't begin to tell you how important that is for the disabled community. It's that recognition. It's that, we see you, and we know that you like to look good, and we've done this just for you. It's so important, and people like to look. I collect these things now, Sam. I used to collect shoes, but they don't do a lot for me now. So I collect funky glasses. I've got loads of pairs and I love them. And when I put them on, it says a little bit about me. It says a little bit. So people use their walking sticks as an extension of themselves to express their personality. We have so many colours and ways that you can personalise them, but people use them to say, that's a bit of me there. If you look at that, you're getting a taste of what I am. And it's priceless. That shift of focus for someone with a disability is quite priceless.
It is. And it give it lives, doesn't it? Right? That's at the end of the day, that's exactly what it is. And to me, and again, I've been around disabled people. I've never seen a cane, like the one that you do. There is no doubt about it. It's either like you said, either they are in wood, which there's nothing wrong with that, or there's black, and it look like basically a stick from a mobility aid, which again, nothing wrong with that. But there's a different sentiment, even just browsing your sites, to say, you know what? Again, let me share a little bit about myself through that stick, which again is not only practical but a part of who I am. I think it is quite extraordinary. And now, basically, obviously, you have different collections, and you have the stick of the month, and perhaps you have the fumes edition as well, which is that's quite interesting. I was looking at it. Tell me more about. You seem to have been very, very excited, obviously, to team up with quite an outstanding actress, Christina Applegate. Tell me more how that came to fruitions, and what does that mean for Neo Walk?
Well, when we spoke about representation, that lady's doing it. She's super high profile. She went out on the red carpet with a walking stick. The whole world was looking at her, and she's out there. And the great actresses and actors are doing, and high profile people are doing the same thing. They're going out there and they're showing that it doesn't make you diminished if you've got a disability of any kind, whether it's temporary or permanent. They're out there. They're doing the work in the media. But the emails, emails are funny. You never know what's going to come. So you get an email from Christina Applegate's fashion designer, her dresser, and saying, Christina's going out on the red carpet, and we'd quite like you to design a walking stick for her, which we did. She loved them. a lot of conversations with Christina. She's actually a really good friend now. And we decided that we could make a walking stick that would raise money for MS charities, because she lives with MS. So we designed this hashtag FUMS, walking stick, me and her. And that's what we do. We, every time somebody buys one of those, we donate money to US and UK MS charities. And that's so important to us, because again, it gives that sense of community to the MS community. And they love that Christina has come out, and she's come out publicly living with MS. It gives them confidence to go out and be seen, and people will stop them and say, oh yeah, you've got a Christina Applegate walking stick. And it's a conversation starter. It's all to do with lifting your confidence, like I said, that feeling of community, and just expressing yourself through your mobility aids.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's so extraordinary, and turning it into a business, like I said, thriving business, and obviously I'm a business owner myself. I know how being a business, how difficult it can be, and how perhaps being an amputee obviously comes with its own unique sets of challenges. Entrepreneurship is about resilience, but your story in life also is about resilience, and I think that pairs very, very nicely with each other. What were some of the biggest perhaps challenges with growing Neil Walk, and how were you able to overcome them, perhaps from a business standpoint?
So in the early days, the biggest negative thing that I used to hear from people about the walking sticks was, what's the point? What's the point of it? You know, these are able-bodied people. What's the point? And because they'd never used one, I fully understand that they didn't see the point. You know, I always say, give a walking stick, give a Neo walk stick to an able-bodied person, and he'll walk like Charlie Chaplin. Give a Neo walk stick to a disabled person, and they'll look at it and go, oh my goodness, that's really lovely, and I love that colour, and look at me walk with it. There's a completely different reaction to it. And I went on Dragon's Den. I don't know whether you know, I did.
Yeah.
I made all the dragons their own walking sticks, and Stephen Bartlett, I mean, he's only a kid, he's only young, but he picked up his light up walking stick and he started jumping around the room with it like it was a lightsaber. You know, and that was the Charlie Chaplin moment. But you give that light up stick to somebody else and they would just break down in tears and say, that's so beautiful. Thank you for making that. It's just the different reactions. But yeah, we've made so many different kinds of walking sticks. We've made walking sticks. We made a really beautiful one for a young lady who was getting married, and her dad had recently passed. Mm-hmm. And she asked us to put some of his ashes in the handle of the walking stick.
Wow.
Which we did. And she walked down the aisle. I told that story 2 weeks ago and I started crying. So I'm really glad I didn't start crying there. But that still just gets me, because we made that young lady's day a little bit more special for her just by being able to do that. And I don't know another walking stick company that can do that. And I don't know another one that would be as approachable as we are, to do that, because we encourage people to personalize all their walking sticks, you know, just to say something about them. In the early days, yeah, I mean, money's always hard, isn't it, Sam? When you're just starting a business out, money's always tough. So we were running on a shoestring. I was designer, maker, post lady, tea lady, marketing, Instagram. I was everything. There was nobody. It was just me. So in the early days. And that's hard because I live with other chronic illness, which caused me pain, fatigue. So I had to kind of temper growing the business with the amount of work that I could do. So that I found that tricky, but I was fortunate enough to be able to have a workshop at home. So I didn't have to travel far. I could literally work in my pajamas, and the guys know that I did early on. But then, of course, growth and you have to start taking staff on. And then that brings its own complications, again, with money, with keeping staff happy. Fortunately, I've got an amazing team who none of them are disabled. None of them have any disabilities, but they're so invested in what we do, in, how I started. They respect that I worked this business for 9 years on my own. And then, so anything I ask them to do, they know it's nothing that I have done. So, there's nothing that I can ask them to do that they would say, no, that's not my job. They wouldn't dream of it. They're an amazing team. There's 10 of us now. And wow. I'm proud that I offer work to all those people. That comes with its own weight on your shoulders, because you've got people relying on you. Mm-hmm. It's proud, and it's, oh my goodness, we've got to keep this thing really, really working, because people are paying their bills now, relying on me. So, kind of for every good thing that comes, you've got to realize the complications that come with it. But, I work with family. That can bring its own complications. But we work well together. It's a very small business. It's that there's a lot of my family are involved. So, and I think that's what people don't always realize about us. They think that we're a big business, a faceless sort of corporation, and we're not. You ring here and I'll pick the phone up, and I'll say it's Lyndsay speaking, and they'll go, Lyndsay? And I'll go, yeah, I pick the phone up as well. We are just a small business, but we have big dreams. We want to tell, I'm not fixated on telling everybody that we're the best walking sticks in the world. What I am fixated on telling people is that there's choice, which previously they may not have known that there was choice.
Right.
And I think that can be very depressing when you don't know. I'll go back to Primark. People can now go into a high street store and they can buy adaptive clothing. We've never had that choice before. They're not saying their clothes are the best. People, they might not agree with the Primark way of making things, but it's there, it's choice. And I think that element of choice is so important for people.
Exactly. And it's truly the power of representations, right? It's changing the perceptions of what it means to be a disabled person and living with disability. And obviously you're such an advocate for going above and beyond basically the business realms and truly going holistically to that core view of what it is, again, to be somebody of part of the tribe, perhaps to use a term you said basically prior in this recording. And how do you see NeoWalk contributing to a broader movement? You were just talking about Primark basically doing a step forward with some of those same aspiration, I suppose, and we see this movement now of redefining basically that disability to a point where it is recognized. Some people again are very, very high class, and I suppose hold in the same standards as people that are basically undisabled, which is also, I think, was one of your objective with your quest, was to sort of a very interesting way of looking at it, which is we're all the same, right? We're just basically, I happens to be disabled, and I found tools basically to accommodate for such things, but we're human beings, we're brothers, we're sisters, we're cousins, we're friends. And so tell me more about how do you see NeoWalk even contributing more and more to this broad movement altogether?
Yeah, I think when I said I realized how important community is, when you get that feeling of being alone, it's crap. I mean, you just feel like there's nobody else going through what you're going through. That feeling of community is something we've really tried to foster in NeoWalk. So you'll see people sharing. These two amazing ladies are people who buy our walking sticks, and they're just so proud of them that, they photograph themselves, they share them. It's that feeling of, you can go on Instagram and you can find somebody who's going through the same things as you. It's that feeling of you aren't alone, and support, friends that you've never met. I haven't met this gorgeous lady. I've met the others, but Of course, that's me. I haven't met her, but I would consider her a friend that I haven't met yet.
Sure.
You know, it's that feeling. And I think when you say about representation, I think it's that feeling of normalizing disability.
Yes.
That feeling of us not being different. You know, I go to the supermarket, and if I'm with my sister, the checkout person will say, "Does she know her PIN number?" And my sister will say, "Well, I don't know. Ask her." You know, like, she's not stupid.
Right.
You know, it really annoys my sister, but that's the kind of treatment that you can be susceptible to as well. It's that feeling of normalization. So when you do go to the supermarket, it's automatic that the person will speak to you. There's no question about it. And I think that's going to be hard to break. I think it's a lot of education. It's bringing up the next generation so when I say children want to talk about, you know, my wheelchair and stuff, they're the people who are going to be the engineers of tomorrow. They're going to be building mobility aids for people. You know, they're the next generation coming through. They're our engineers. They're our politicians that are going to be, you know, hell bent on having, disability representation in the government. There's not a huge amount of, you know, you don't get many disabled politicians, really. They're all kind of areas where you would least expect to find people with disabilities. But why? There's no reason why not. And I think it's going to be hard to break. And these are all things that we think about at NeoWalk. We're not just about make a stick, sell it, make a stick, sell it. We're very focused on educating people on how to, you know, get the best out of their mobility aids, how to do it safely. Other mobility aids on the market, you know, one of our walking sticks might not be what you need. If it isn't, I won't sell you one. You won't get one. We'll direct you to something that might be better for you. You know, we just want people to know that there's choice out there. But breaking down old, aged, preconceptions of people, that's a hard thing to do.
It is. But you, from your understanding, we're going the right directions, right?
I feel so. You know, hugely buoyed up by Primark last week. It's just incredible. You know what also happened? And I cried when I asked the assistant this. Have you heard of Shoe? There are other shoe companies available, but Shoe, SCHUH. I can now go in there and they'll sell me one shoe.
There we go. I love that. I love that.
I read it online, couldn't believe it, went into my local store and said, "Is this true?" Young lady said, "Yeah, can I help you?" And I cried because it was the first time that I'd felt such a big shift in acceptance of what people with disabilities needed. And that's huge, isn't it? I mean, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And that's incredible. That's incredible. And I love what Natasha Bedingfield said, which is the best chapter of my life are still unwritten, and I'm ready to write them boldly. And I think that fits your story and the story of so many other amputees so well. And I was wondering as well, as you're seeing shoes, as you're seeing Primark, as you're seeing obviously NeoWalk making some huge stride. Tell me more about. And you're seeing obviously your story as well and unfold in a way in which just seems to become better and better, which is obviously quite lovely. Would you say that that's next for you and NeoWalk and its legacy? It's kind of like understanding how we can become part of a broader movements of, let's get basically amputees people within politics, within realms of powers, because, well, first of all, why not? And two, to bring the humanity that is necessary for it to feel like not only you're not alone, but you can be a somebody, you can be a superhero. Isn't that perhaps the kind of like what you see next and what the legacy holds?
Yeah. And it's partly why I've started doing more podcasts like your lovely podcast to actually talk to people, to get the message out. So I do focus, just this year, I'm focusing on podcasts. Each year I focus on something different. So this year I'm focusing on that to try and get to talk to as many people as possible to get that. You know, you'll have listeners where a lot of this will come as a surprise to them. And that's great because they'll go away from here learning something and thinking, oh goodness, did I do that? Have I said that? And it just might make you think next time you interact or next time you tell a bad joke about one shoe. But, it's that kind of thing. I want to speak. I want to speak out. I would love to go down to Westminster. I would love to go down there and talk to. I did have the Minister for Disability here last summer. She came and visited. That was really good. And I don't believe she's actually the Minister for Disability any longer. So that was short-lived. Yeah, but yeah, we do have some interest from higher powers. I would love to get more famous people. I would love to get someone like Elton John on board to talk about the importance of mobility aids, because I know he uses one, and he would use one that expressed himself. I mean, we could make some crazy ones for him. But someone like that, again, it's that profile that shows that, I'm just a disabled person. I'm not diminished in any way, shape or form. Look at me. So we want to concentrate on that. We want to concentrate on helping our community meet each other. So we are going to be doing, which is very exciting, some what we're going to call community road shows, where the team from Neo Walk are going to go and set up, hopefully in a nice cafe or a nice hotel somewhere, and invite loads of people to come along with their mobility aids, to come and meet people that they've maybe met on our community, on our Instagram community, but to come along and meet each other and actually speak face to face. I think you can't underestimate the importance of actually speaking face to face and learning from other people. We find that this happens a lot that we have a mobility aid exhibition in the UK every year, and it's called NAIDEX, and we've done it for the last few years. So we always go along. We meet loads of our customers, and people go along and they meet each other there. So we know it already works, and we want to encourage people to reach out and really get and give support to other people with disabilities. So yeah, Community Roadshow will be coming soon this year. So I'm excited about that. We do focus on, I mean, don't get me wrong, we're always designing new walking sticks, and we're always new colours and different styles and things like that. But that person to person, because I'm part of the community that I serve, I think I'm in a really unique sort of position. Even right from the day that I started, I'm part of it. And I've been so lucky to be so warmly accepted, because I am still a person with a disability. So they see me as both. They see me as Lyndsay Neo Walk, but I'm still just Lyndsay. And I have my terrible days and down days and days where I just think I can't go on, and it's hard. And I've got friends in our community that keep me going. So I know how important it feels.
Extraordinary. Well, Mr. Elton John, if you're seeing this is your call. Give Lyndsay an email, and we'll find a way to get Elton. We'll talk about that afterwards. But Miss Lyndsay Mitchinson, was an absolute pleasure to have you on the Meaningful Podcast. Thank you so much for sharing and being very vulnerable towards your story. We so appreciate it, truly. And not only who you are as a person, but what you're trying to build is something that I think will not only withstand perhaps the test of time, but perhaps why not make the world a better place? I would love if you can share some last words of wisdom with our audience, please.
I think what people get in Neo Walk is a very authentic team that care. And I think that in the world, if you can be anything, be kind. And I know that's said, and it's probably said so much that it's kind of lost its meaning a little bit. But I still think that's the best way that you can live your life. Being real, being empathetic, being understanding, the smiles. You never know what's going on behind the smiles. And I think that's something that being disabled, and disability is the one thing that can happen to anybody at any moment. It's the one leveling thing across the population. It could happen to any one of us at any time. And, you know, I hope your listeners, I really hope they don't have to live through half of the stuff. I hope they have half the adventures I've had. You'll never hear me say that it's ruined my life, because it hasn't. And I think that's also important as well. To lie down and give up, it just wasn't something that I could do. So I'm super proud of everything that we've accomplished, and everything that we're heading for as well.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.